Hello everyone, welcome to ET Studios, and today we're doing something a bit different again as we're building a new office PC because the old one that we have around here happened to die. And that actually happens to be my old laptop from way back when I was doing Space Engineers on DirectX 9. So that's now crashed and I've been tasked with building a new office PC, and I was right up to the task. Now, I decided to make a budget PC video out of this. This is not a gaming PC by any standards. We have over here an i3-2120, 4GB of RAM, a nice MSI motherboard, 500GB of storage, a 350-watt power supply, and a half-decent cooler. So for those of you who already have their parts listed out, I'll have on the screen exactly where we start building. But for those of you who are here for what parts to buy, I'm going to go through them now. So the i3-2120 is the centerpiece of our build here, and it is a 3.3 GHz dual core, which is an amazing processor, simple desktop processors, and it's amazing for any of those. So it's a very simple processor, very cheap, and we got it for about $40. You could probably get this between $40 to $50 second-hand or brand new, depending on where you bought. So this is one of the parts I would say would be better for second-hand, rather than the hard drive or the power supply. Second, we move over to our RAM. This is 4GB of DDR3 1600, although our processor only supports 1333 MHz. And don't worry if you don't understand exactly what I'm saying. Just buy DDR3 to match DDR3 motherboard. If you're buying a 1155 socket processor, make sure to buy a 1155 socket motherboard. And those are the basic rules, just match the two. So over here we have our great motherboard, which is an MSI 861 motherboard. It's great for anything really. It's a very basic motherboard. It can also go for gaming. You've got some nice overclocking capability here, as well as full compatibility for our processor and the generation above if you wanted to upgrade in future. So let's say you wanted to build an office PC, but it may become a friend of yours or your own gaming PC in future. This would be a great PC to upgrade to that in the future. Now we move over to our hard drive. It's a 500GB Seagate drive. Nothing too special about it, but it is brand new, and we got it really cheaply at about $30 US. Moving on to our cooler here, we have a cooler capable of fitting basically any motherboard from 1150 all the way to 1155. It's a perfect cooler for what we're doing. We don't need to have any crazy aftermarket coolers because we're not overclocking an extreme gaming rig, we're just making a simple office PC. Next, our power supply is a Thermaltake Light Power 350-watt power supply, which is perfect for our needs. We don't need anything more. It also has a great 2-year warranty, and like I said, all of these parts, except for our i3 here, are brand new. Of course, not the case. For the case, you can buy pretty much any very simple case, and some even come with power supplies already in them. Over here we have a very simple Mesa Symphony case that I picked up from an old office PC, and in fact it was the start of the ultra cheap PC build. So now let's get on to building this thing, and I will be going through the whole building process.
Alright, so here we have it. Our motherboard is in this nice little box. It is brand new, like I said before, and I have swapped over to post commentary now, so this is not live. So that is our I/O shield. We'll need that later for installing the motherboard, and these are two SATA cables which you use to connect hard drives and disk drives to your motherboard. And here's the motherboard itself. Note I am not holding it by any fragile pieces, I'm holding it by the packet itself. Don't touch the motherboard unless you are holding it from the sides or from somewhere you can see is supposed to be held from. So there's our drivers, we'll need to install those later, and there's our manual that you can refer to as well if you have any problems. So let's take the motherboard out of the packet and put it onto the box for installation of the CPU, RAM and cooler. So there should be a little bit of tape just holding it on over here. So rip that off and you'll be able to take out the motherboard. Like I said before, try not to touch any sensitive areas and try to touch the motherboard as little as possible. So now that we have the motherboard out of the packet, we're going to be placing it on the box, ready for CPU installation. Now that you have your CPU, you are going to have to undo this little latch, pulling it to the side and then up. Then it slowly releases, pulling back that, and then you'll have an exposed CPU socket. Note this is incredibly fragile, don't touch the socket itself or any of the pins, otherwise it can be very badly damaged and your PC may not work at all. So here's our little i3-2120, and note this motherboard can also fit 3rd generation processors if you so wish. So popping this into the motherboard, there is a little triangle on the top part of the socket, bottom left of the socket, where you line it up, and there's also 2 notches in the CPU that line up with the socket. When you place it down, don't do exactly what I did here. You have to pull down the main part of it first and then pull down the latch. So for example, like I am now, not doing correctly at all, because I'm not used to this socket exactly, but the principle stays the same. Pull down that first and then pull down the latch to secure it in place. The easiest way to tell is because it is underneath the little screw. And there's the little triangle I was talking about at the bottom left. Now we're moving on to RAM installation. Mine is low profile RAM, so it may be slightly less tall than yours, so it may look slightly different, but the principle is the same and it's exactly the same type of RAM. So on this you have to pull back those 2 tabs on either side of the socket and make sure you're in the right slot. I know if there's a 4-slot motherboard and you're only installing 1 RAM stick, the DIMM slots are labelled. You can see there at the bottom left it does say DIMM2 next to the socket. So line up the little notch on the RAM to the notch on the RAM slot, then push down with equal pressure on both sides and it should clip into place. Then make sure the tabs are closed on either side and RAM installation is done. This is one of the easiest things you can do. And now for the CPU cooler. So this little cooler is a really simple and basic design. It's very similar to the Intel stock cooler, and on the bottom is pre-applied thermal paste. If you're buying one that's second hand, it won't have this and you have to buy it separately. If you are applying it on your own, make sure there's a little pea-sized blob in the middle of the processor and then put on the cooler. Now that you have your cooler, make sure that you have taken off that little plastic part at the bottom so it'll apply the thermal paste to the CPU. Then also remember to plug in the wire into the CPU fan header on the motherboard once you have put on your cooler. So installing is really simple. Line it up with the 4 holes on the motherboard and push down on all the tabs to make sure it's securely in place. One would usually not do it 1, 2, 3, 4 around the sides, go across just to apply equal pressure, but that isn't really necessary for such a small cooler like this. It should be fairly stable on there. I am holding it with my second hand on the bottom, just by the way. And now that you've done that, you can plug in the CPU fan header, which is fairly interesting doing while holding, so maybe put it down to do that. But anyway, once you've finished installing your fan header, you're ready to test your motherboard. To test your motherboard, of course, you'll need a power supply to plug all the wires in and give it power. So here's my lovely light power supply, and it came with a nice little power cord in there. It's not modular at all, but that's only really necessary if you have a tempered glass side panel and you want it to look absolutely stunning inside. But anyway, this is a very basic unit and it worked perfectly for what we needed it to. Like I said, it's a 350 watt unit, so it's perfect for powering an office PC and even graphics cards like a GTX 1050 if you wanted to go into gaming. Just don't hook it up with something that needs lots of external power. So besides the point, it's very easy to just take out the bubble wrap and then you have a power supply. Now I've taken out all the wires and the bubble wrap off the power supply. You have all these mixes of wires. I'll show you exactly which ones are supposed to go where. So you'll notice on the motherboard there is a 24-pin, really long slot where you put in your one power cable, and there's a connector for a 4-pin, which I'm holding now. That's a 6-pin on the left for graphics cards, and that's a 4-pin for the CPU on the top of the motherboard. This is your really long 24-pin power connector, and you have to plug that into the motherboard as well. Those are the two you really need for the motherboard, and there'll be one more, the SATA connector at the bottom left that I'm holding right now, which will be used for plugging in the hard drive. Other than that, you shouldn't really need anything. Right now I've plugged everything in and plugged the power supply into the wall to do a basic test. Without a switch, the easiest way to do this is to short the two pins where it says power switch on your motherboard manual. Make sure you're shorting the right ones, but it really doesn't matter. You won't do any damage to the system if you poke the wrong ones. Cool moment of truth. And it's on. Which does mean that the computer is running and should work if I plugged it into a monitor. So now that testing is complete on the motherboard and we know we have a working system, we're going to put it into the case. If anything goes wrong here, at least we know that we made the mistake and we don't have to send it back because we can just track back and see if it still works once you've uninstalled it from the case. But from here it's fairly simple. Install the IO shield at the back of the case like this. All IO shields are the same size unless you have a very special custom made one, but you shouldn't. So I'm just putting this little fan cable aside because it's annoying me, and all you have to do now is install the motherboard. I lost a little bit of footage there because of a slightly strange issue, but make sure you've just lined it up with all the parts of your IO shield just so you can not have any screws that won't go into the holes properly, and make sure your motherboard goes in nicely. If it isn't going in nicely, just make sure IO shield is installed properly and make sure there's nothing blocking the motherboard underneath or on either side. Now that we've installed the motherboard, we just have to install all of these screws, make sure it's held in place. If you don't, it will probably fall over as soon as you pull up the case the right way around. If you miss a few, it doesn't really matter, but I really suggest putting all the screws in. Also remember, this case did come with standoffs at the bottom, but most cases, if you buy them, will have little standoffs that you have to place in. Please remember those, they're very important. If you don't put them in, you can short out your motherboard. They're little tiny kind of screw plates basically where your motherboard sits on them and then you put the screws in through them. You should have to have about 4 to 6 of them depending on your motherboard. So I've sped up the footage here by 4 times just installing all the screws. The one on the bottom right didn't have a standoff there and I forgot to move it. Now for installing the power supply, it's a fairly simple process. Just make sure it lines up with the screws at the back, the screw holes at the back of the case, and then plug all the wires into the correct places. It's a very simple process, and the power supply should have come with screws anyway, so you can just screw it into the back without having to buy any additional ones. There are very simple PC screw sets you can buy if you don't have any motherboard ones, standoffs, etc., and they go for really cheaply, anywhere between $5 and $15 US. So installing the power supply now, very simple, just line it up with screw holes and then put in the first screw, and from there it's easy. Alright, so it is kind of a moment of truth now. We've plugged in everything seems to be good. I put in the power switch at the front, and all the other things that the front panel connectors are plugged in, as well as all of the cables from the power supply to the hard drive, etc. Now what I will do later on is install an operating system, etc. But right now I'm going to see if the boots on. And there we go, it is working. So for those of you who are very new to computers, on the motherboard at the back there should be a point here where this cable can match up. If you have a different cable, that's okay, as long as your motherboard has one. Plug it in and boom, we have a post to the screen. All it means is that we have not yet installed an operating system or a hard drive, so we won't be able to boot into Windows. If you'd like to see a Windows installation, there are many YouTube channels out there who do it, but I won't be featuring in this particular episode. I might be in future. Now that we've confirmed the PC does work, I'm just installing the hard drive in the background here. It's a very simple process. If you just want to watch me do it in the background, it's very simple. But thank you everyone for watching. It's been a great fun time building this new PC. Nothing really went wrong at all. It's been a pleasure to build it, and I hope you learned something from it, and I hope you, if you have any questions, you'll ask them in the comments below, and I hope to reply with a good answer. So I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, and if you like this kind of content, I do it every now and then on the channel, and if you like gaming, I do that on the channel a lot, so please consider subscribing as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you in the next video.